Hello, everyone. We're going to have an interview with Joshua today, writer of Deeper from Hell.
Deeper than hell.
Oh, my goodness. All right. It's the morning.
It is, man. I'm sitting here on my first cup of coffee of the day.
I haven't had any.
It's the morning. It is. That's man. Me.
Oh, it's all good.
First cup of coffee.
It's all good. It's fine.
That's why there's the first few Rocky Minutes of everything. I was copying the link so I could let my followers on Facebook and Twitter know to check me out.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Joshua, you're no stranger to horror, but this is your first novel. Can we talk about your background a little bit here?
Of course, yeah. You know, most people know me as the guy from Dread Central. I started contributing articles to Dread Central in 2016. By 2018, I was working pretty much full time as the managing editor. And then in 2019, I became editor in chief and held that position until just recently when I went on maternity leave / sabbatical to celebrate the birth of my son and to be a part of his rearing, his coming into this world. It's been wonderful not having much work and just being able to focus on him. It's been a real blessing. And now that I have this wonderful, incredibly cool little dude in my life, I don't want to go back to that same job with those same hours. So that's why I'm looking to shift my life towards books, Deeper Than Hell, of course. But later on, we can talk about a couple other things that I've got cooking.
Okay. So I gotta ask, what were your big inspirations for Deeper Than Hell? Because there's a lot to unpack in that story. A lot of different sort of horror subgenres are kind of thrown in.
That was on purpose. Literarily, if that's a word, I would say I was most inspired by Clive Barker and William S. Burroughs. Clive for his dark fantasy, for his no holds barred look, his unflinching eye. William S. Burroughs for his psychedelia, for his using drugs as a passage to a complete other world. Those two guys. But as you can probably tell, as someone who's read it, I was inspired by horror cinema, a lot of horror cinema. And I was also inspired by conspiracy theories, mainly Hollow Earth theory. And just like the character in Deeper Than Hell, Drew says he goes to the library and watches YouTube videos. I've just watched tons of YouTube videos on conspiracies and creepypastas and true crime, and all that just came together into this singular, pretty lean novel. It's not much more than a novella, truthfully. It's just jam-packed.
It is. But at the same time, it's a really fast-paced read.
Thank you.
Oh yeah.
The fact that it has so many subgenres, there are certain chapters that are actually supposed to reflect certain subgenres. Like chapter 3, for example, is body horror and medical horror, and then there's sci-fi, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, it was. I thought of it as like a love letter to horror cinema, and just the different decades of it, and just basically any sort of fear you have is going to be brought up. It's an exodus of pain and terror.
That's a good way to put it.
It's just from chapter to chapter, just crazy in like the best way.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was. I was reading it on my breaks, and I'd be like, "Oh," and like people would like look over and like, "Are you okay?" I'd be grimacing at something like, "Oh no, this is good." If I have this reaction.
I loved your review, by the way, and I love how you said it's the grossest thing you've ever read that's still worth reading. You know, that
Yes.
meant a lot to me.
Yes, because there are certain authors I won't name on here, but like it's almost too much. Like it just becomes a show of like, look, I can put this in my book, and then like there's no substance to it. You have to have some substance in order to just go to these levels of disgusting.
Yeah, you know, the same rule holds true in horror cinema. You know,
Mhm.
there has to be a reason to go extreme.
Yeah, and like even like I'm not really into, well, I used to be really into body horror and the whole post 9/11 cinema sort of horror, but that's not my thing anymore. But I like it in a book because you have to be so descriptive with it. And at the same time, not, you have to leave stuff up for the human imagination. And I think this book really balances that out. Like,
Fantastic. Yeah, because you know, I can do my best to describe things in a new and original way. I can do my best to bring unique dark visions to the page. You know, but at the same time, that knowing when to hold back on the descriptions and let the reader fill it in with their own imagination, because sometimes, you know, especially when you're talking about what scares you specifically, when you leave certain parts blank, people fill them in with their own personal worst fears or worst interpretations. And sometimes that's better than anything I could make up.
so how'd you get this idea for this book? And then what was your writing process? I have a few people on here that are aspiring writers and they want to know like the
Well,
process.
yeah, it was really unique how I came to this. I love telling the story. Um, excuse me. First of all, Deeper Than Hell was written many years, not many, but like 6 or 7 years ago. Obama was still president when I wrote Deeper Than Hell.
Okay.
And the impetus, the inspiration was I saw that there was this online literary magazine. I forget the name of it, but they put the word out that they were looking for writers to write serials where they would post one chapter a month for an entire year. And then at the end of the year, they'd release it as a novel. And I thought that's fantastic. You know, at the time I was doing a lot of freelance stuff. So, you know, I think they were paying like $100 per chapter, and that would be great, you know, to add to my, you know, kind of subsistence income. I thought up, you know, this idea Deeper Than Hell, you know, life underground, which has always really fascinated me, Hollow Earth, life underground.
Mhm.
So I sent a little synopsis. Congratulations, you're in the semifinals. Now we want you to write the entire chapter one and give us an outline of what every chapter is going to be. So awesome. So like I have, you know, 6 weeks to write chapter one, and I just like really just like, you know, pour everything into it, and I review it 30, 40, 50 times, you know, subtly tweaking here and there. And then I come up with this outline where, you know, it forced me to think of everything from, you know, Once Upon a Time all the way to the end, you know, so I had everything, you know, mapped out. And I had tried to write novels before, and I had just gotten way out in the weeds. You know, you figure you start at the beginning and it ends when you know you've gotten to the ending, and I just could never get to that ending. You know, I was just writing myself into oblivion. But now I have this outline, so I submitted it. And thanks for submitting. We're sorry, yours was not one that was selected. And it's like, oh damn, you know, disappointment. But then it's like, well, I've done this much, you know, so why don't I challenge myself to write one chapter a month, you know, spend an entire month on each chapter, just really trying to nail it. And so I did. And I didn't get everyone on the 1 month margin. You know, some of them took 2 months. And, you know, I didn't really spend an entire month on every single chapter. Sometimes, you know, most of the month would go by and I'd be like, oh, now I got to buckle down and finish this. But no, I got from Once Upon a Time all the way to the end, and I had never done that before. And you know, part of what makes Deeper Than Hell, what gives it that style specifically, is because I imagined, okay, this is going to be released chapter at a time, one chapter at a month. a month, I wanted to have each chapter end on a cliffhanger so that you'd be really interested in reading a month later. So, that's why each chapter is a little bit self-contained, and why they have vastly different vibes. Chapter 3 is like the worst chapter in the entire thing. Chapter 11 is pretty hardcore too. But it's like, I imagine a lot of people are going to get to chapter 3 and be like, wow, is this going to be it for like the next 100 pages? And it's like, no. just bear down and get through it, because the tone shifts are wild.
What were some of the films? Because there's some clear references to horror and to cinema in general. But there's also, I think, some more subtle ones. But what were some films? Because it felt like each chapter you're going to a new subgenre. Did you like watch a film of that genre to prep for it, or like?
No, not really. I mean, I think it's gonna sound funny, but one of the very first inspirations is Chud. Because I remember seeing that videotape, back when video stores were still a thing, and that monster peeping out of that manhole. It's just like, wow, the idea that there are not only societies of humans but societies of monsters living underground. And in Chud, you find out that they're one and the same, and blah blah blah, which is a great metaphor. That's not quite where Deeper Than Hell goes, but also I was really re-inspired more recently when I saw The Midnight Meat Train in around 2008, because that film's just amazing. It has almost the Matrix type look to it. It's so sleek and clean, but it's so hardcore with the violence. And not to be a super spoiler, because those who haven't seen it should see it, but it starts off very grounded, very gritty, slasher tropes, and then it ends really in the realm of dark fantasy. And I loved that. I loved the idea of going from something very grounded into something that you just never could have predicted. So film-wise, those are it. But also, I'm just a horror movie nut, and I consume horror movies fervently. And, as I'd kind of craft each chapter, as I'd set the mood, as I'd, put the imagery out there, I would just kind of, in the back of my mind, be holding certain films in my head, maybe just for a quick image, maybe for an inside joke, and I do that a lot throughout the novel.
Yeah, I like that there are consequences, because it's very episodic. And it could have easily been like there weren't any we keep talking about chapter 3, but I liked in chapter 4, you realize how bad chapter 3, like there's shocking, awesome, nasty things in chapter 3, but chapter 4, you realize, oh, it was really that bad and worse. Like things you wouldn't think about. There's just all sorts of consequences, because Sonny, our main character, he is human, and that's like the one constant throughout this, because there's some wild things I've never thought about before. But he's like, well, it's his perspective. It's first person from his perspective, and he is the constant that is going through all this. So I don't know. I hadn't read anything first person in a while, especially horror. I think the last horror first person story I read was Jerusalem's Lot by Stephen King out of Night Shift, which is a really bizarre prequel to Salem's Lot.
Right.
Just barely a prequel. But I like that they're like all the thought, every sort of thing, like, oh, if this happens, then this would be the consequence, is just thought out throughout this. Did you know the end when you started this, or did you just let it?
No, I absolutely knew the end, because like I said, when they said you're in the semifinals, send us an outline, I totally did an outline where I was like, in this chapter, Sonny's with the Acolytes of Ascension. In this chapter, Sonny's with the Children of the Inferno. In this chapter, Sonny arrives at the Great Bottom. In this chapter, Sonny has his existential crisis. In this chapter, so it was absolutely thought out. I mean, I'm sure I took, a while to do this. Like I said, when they said you're in the semifinals, I had like a month to come up with chapter 1 in this outline. So, at first it was kind of nebulous. I had to like fill in the pieces, but no, I knew the ending, including the epilogue, which I understand will be kind of controversial. I kind of expected that, but yeah, I knew it all in my head. Basically, I had a blueprint, but the good thing about sitting on it for 6 years, if there's any good thing about that, when I did dust it off and think, okay, this is something I'm going to show to a publisher, I had to look through it, and you change so much as a writer in 6 years if you do it daily the way I was doing it, for journalism. So, chapter 8, the deep underground military base, that was I actually completely gutted that. In the original, it was almost completely different. Setting was the same, but it just didn't. It just wasn't up to the caliber of the other chapters. So I was able to go back and completely redo the weak parts. Knowing that it was going to be all put together in novel form, knowing that this wouldn't just be a placeholder to get people to come back in a month, that this is potentially a place where I could lose someone if the quality dips. It forced me to go back and make sure, all the chapters were consistently well written.
Okay. Would you do a sequel to this, like a spiritual successor? Like, I'm not saying we get Deeper Than Hell 2, but like I'm saying like something in this same universe.
I'm going to give the fans what they want. If they want to know more about this, I will gladly fall down these rabbit holes once again. There are different characters even presented. I don't want to get too spoilery, but let's talk about Thaddeus. This guy who you kind of briefly meet in chapter 1, then shows up again in chapter 8, and it's like, how did you get here? And there's kind of a vague description. But maybe you want to know how Thaddeus, ended up in his own hell and what he endured. The blue collar drug dealer who, never really had aspirations. What's going on with him? So that would be like the easiest one to do, the most obvious, I guess. And if people want to hear what happened to Thaddeus, I'll let them know. Let's see how Deeper Than Hell does.
Yeah, I thought he was a really interesting character. I didn't bring him up in my review so much because I didn't want to spoil, because he has some weird things like happen to him that I did get a little chuckle out of.
Good.
I did, like, there. I'm not saying this is just a straight up serious, like, oh, this is horrific. There is humor in here.
Oh yeah.
And you relish it because
Mm-hmm.
you need that when going into like the insanity of these levels of, well, they're all each their own sort of hell.
Exactly. Yeah.
Let's see here. I had notes and then I lost the notes. So
all right, we'll keep it organic.
Yeah. Okay. So I see that you are sort of a horror collector.
Yes, this is my collection around.
When as a father, because we talked about you have a 7-month-old now.
Mm-hmm.
When do you think it's appropriate for kids to see horror films?
Well, I think there's age appropriate horror. There's age appropriate horror for every age.
Mm-hmm.
What am I trying to say? I think he can start off by watching Scooby-Doo, like I did. And there's so much more horror now than there was when I was growing up. Like excuse me, I saw R-rated horror movies, when I was 9, 10, 11. Earlier than I probably should have. But for kiddo, I can show him PG-13 horror when he's 13. In the meantime, there's Coraline, there's Beetlejuice. There are things along the way that I can show him at 4, 5, 6. So I look forward to, if he's interested, curating his interest. And with my vast encyclopedic knowledge, I'm pretty sure I could find something for him at every stage. And that goes for everyone, because I work in horror, and a lot of people come to me and go like, oh, that's cool that you do that, but I don't really like horror movies. And I'll be like, no, you do. You just don't know it yet, And I can, if you say, people hear horror and they think you're talking about slasher. They think Jason, Freddy, Michael Myers. They kind of think that's it. And, I'll show people something like Mama that's just like so intense, but also just so beautiful and so real in terms of the emotions it's communicating. So I could find a horror movie for anyone. Someone who says they're too scared. Not all horror movies are scary. Some just, relish in a mood. I could recommend something where, you're not going to be made squeamish, but you're still going to go to a place of dread. So there's horror for everyone.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I like when bringing y'all on for Encyclopocalypse is like horror has been considered such a taboo for so long, and it's just it's the whole MPAA like narrow mindset of they're corrupting our youth sort of thing. I don't know. Have you ever watched the In Search of Darkness documentaries?
Yeah, of course.
I really like the first one, and just like talking about like renting these films, because I rented a lot of them still, even though I'm like I grew up in the 2000s. Like I grew up in a small town where we didn't really have internet for a good chunk of my childhood. So like I kind of lived that, where it was like, ooh, I get to go to the horror section. Oh, I hope I don't get scared, like sort of thing when I was a kid. And I grew up with like the big monster movies, like the Godzilla stuff. And then that sort of branched out into, oh, what's this? And you just pick something based on the cover. And it could
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Just terrible.
That's why it's great. Encyclopocalypse, I love their covers. They do a lot of movie novelizations, which have these, classic movie covers. So it almost feels like you're back in a video store when you're at encyclopocalypse.com and you're looking through what they sell. I love the cover of Deeper Than Hell. There's no physical copy yet to show people, but who did that? Christian Francis actually did that as well. He's not just an incredible writer. He's an incredible artist, an incredible graphics designer. And that's something that he was kind of shy to even let people know about until very recently, but he does incredible work.
Yeah, I really, really liked the Deeper Than Hell. It just feels fresh. Like the cover feels fresh, the story's fresh, because it feels like sometimes when you get into horror writing, it's like it's just Stephen King, Dean Koontz, Clive Barker, that's Peter Straub, that sort of niche where but like it's so much more than that. That's like something that I really like from Encyclopocalypse, is we're getting people like you, Joshua, like just giving a fresh perspective on things, but at the same time honoring what's been before.
Absolutely. That's why, it's so meta in that it states its inspirations, along the way. Like, I love the fact that, because, people are going to be debating like what really happens, because it's ambiguous. I love the fact that Sonny and Drew just kind of acknowledged like, hey, maybe this is a Jacob's Ladder scenario. It's because like, I know that the reader is going to be thinking that, wondering the whole time, is this just a dream because it's so far out?
Oh yeah.
So that's just like kind of let you off the hook for thinking that, like, we understand, it definitely feels that way. But yeah, I loved wearing my inspirations on my sleeve and giving credit along the way. Chapter 3, the infamous Chapter 3, that really is an ode to Clive Barker. The acolytes of Ascension are basically wannabe Cenobites who, are trying to find the line between pleasure and pain, and really just live as though the Order of the Gash is a real thing. And I say so in it, Sonny goes, that guy looks like a Cenobite, it's,
that whole chapter is just it's wild.
I wonder, and maybe you can help me, because I wouldn't say I'm nervous, but at the same time, it's kind of like this is going to come out, and I'm definitely going to be able to tell people's sensibilities based on how they react to Chapter 3. I'm afraid people are going to go like, my God, Josh, I didn't know you were so sick. Am I going to have to defend myself? Is it that bad?
I've said, I've read worse, far worse, and it is as bad as it needs to be. You need that wake up call. I mean, Chapter 2 ends gnarly too.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, like that. Well, because Chapter 1 is so grounded in reality, and then Chapter 2, there's all these all sorts of bugs and rats.
Yeah,
nasty
among other things.
And then Chapter 3's wild. Chapter 4 arguably is more wild. That's crazier, but it's more
it's psychological.
And just I'm halfway through it and I'm like, okay, when's the other shoe gonna drop? And then it does. And I don't I'm just, we're hyping it up because that's Chapter 3 is what really gets me in horror, specifically.
I mean, it's what gets me too. That's why there's so much medical horror mixed in there, because that's super scary too. The idea of having tubes in your body and being on a gurney, and then thinking about it even worse, you're in a gurney with a sheet covered in blood over you. It's just it's one of my worst nightmares. So I was just trying to be true to that, and not to give too much away again, but I was really interested in trepanning, because I actually knew a guy who told me that he was considering drilling a hole in his forehead to unlock his third eye, and that always stuck with me, that he was actually willing to do that. So yeah, tons of body horror, these wannabe Cenobites, and I was just thinking about people who push that body modification to extremes. We have people splitting their tongues and things like that. Well, I wanted to go even more intense than that. People with their eyes and mouth sewn shut. I just imagined body modifications that could not be undone. And that's why it just gets so wild.
So what's really scares you when you're watching or reading horror, aside from body horror? What really makes you on the edge of your seat, uncomfortable?
I love supernatural horror, and it's funny because I don't believe in ghosts. Because if ghosts were real, we'd have proof by now. People have been trying for too many decades, centuries, to document a ghost, and they have no proof. And until I see it on CNN, I'm not going to believe it. At the same time, that's the horror that gets to me. That's the thing that I have to look over my shoulder, when there's an idea of a demonic possession or a figure. The Conjuring movies scare the fuck out of me. The Nun is just like, my God, Bathsheba from the original Conjuring. That really scares me, man. These characters, Insidious, some of the characters from Insidious, the lipstick-faced demon, when you see that beautiful jump scare, those are the things that get to me. I just love me some supernatural horror, which is kind of funny because, Deeper Than Hell is definitely paranormal, but not really supernatural. Okay, Drew, again, not to give too many spoilers, but, there's the insinuation all the way through that they can only really connect when Sunny's high, which gives its own telescoping layers of, how much of this can we take seriously. But yeah, now we're going down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, that whole the whole heroin aspect reminded me a lot of Requiem for a Dream.
Yeah,
I
my
think
friend, a buddy of mine, said that Deeper Than Hell is like Goonies meets Requiem for a Dream, and I loved that.
oh, that's so true.
It is.
Yeah, I'm of the opinion that Requiem for a Dream is like one of the most terrifying things
Tell
I've
me about
ever
it.
seen.
Yeah, those scenes with the mom, in the refrigerator. I mean, that refrigerator scared the fuck out of me.
The whole climax where with the music's just going crazy and we're intercutting between all these stories and all these horrible things are happening and they're synced
Yeah,
up to the music. Like,
yeah. And then at the end, it's just like pop, and it's just like, you're exhausted. But yeah, kind of to address the elephant in the room, this is a book about IV drug users. I've never been an IV drug user. That's why, when there's no description of the actual shooting up, because I have no experience with that. And, when you read heroin literature like Irving Welsh, they always talk about the blood squirting back into the syringe and pressing the button and stuff like that. There's none of that in there because I don't really have any experience with that. I was inspired by Requiem for a Dream, and I was inspired by Train Spotting, and I loved William S. Burroughs. How he made heroin so seductive, and the needle itself so seductive, and the fact that when he was high on heroin, he just went to these completely psychedelic worlds. But I don't have any experience with that personally.
nor do I, but where I live, there's a lot of that goes on. So I witness it on a regular basis. So like, but with that being said, you understand, like, when reading this, you understand the basics of how heroin functions.
Yeah,
Pretty
absolutely.
much.
To put it into, try the way I thought about it when I was writing, it's like I imagined the best aspects of, psychedelic mushrooms and the best aspects of MDMA, and then kind of enhanced it with everything else. Like I said, my inspirations, William S. Burroughs and Train Spotting and Requiem for a Dream. What was the question again?
What scares you?
I know.
Where we were.
Oh, man.
We
I
went
had
off.
a train of thought and it just went off the rails. But one thing I did want to, and I hope, so far readers have told me this. I wanted Sunny to just be very human. I know people who have gone down that path as well. I've known heroin addicts, and I've known meth addicts who shoot up and things like that, and it's really sad, and it's really harrowing. And I mean no disrespect in what I'm writing, and I want Sunny to be human, and I want him to be relatable first and foremost.
Yeah. I also get an aspect of this where it feels like a Heart of Darkness or Apocalypse Now, where
Absolutely.
we're going up the river into just craziness, and
Right.
it gets stranger and more surreal as you go deeper in. Which Apocalypse Now, another horror film that I don't think people realize is a horror.
Totally. And that's a great comparison too, because, like Martin Sheen in that movie, Sonny and Drew have a destination the whole time. Everything that happens to them along the way is kind of coincidental, because they just wanted to get to the end point as soon as possible. They were just goal oriented, destination oriented, and all this stuff just happens along the way, which kind of, goes to that old saying, it's the journey, not the destination. When people are going to be arguing about what actually happens, at the conclusion of Deeper Than Hell, hopefully that's something that they can, be satisfied with, because you aren't going to get your answer on a silver platter. And I intended that, it goes seamlessly between possibilities. If you insist on an answer, you can find something in the epilogue that, will go like, okay, but you can kind of take or leave the epilogue too. You can kind of like just, end where it ends, realizing that a lot of it was just, depictions of hell and what hell actually is when you get down to it.
Or you can choose not to. Like,
to.
I mean, that's all literature is. It's up to interpretation. And I did shit on the epilogue a little bit. I'm sorry.
No, totally valid. Sean, who's been like my somewhere between like an agent and an editor, Sean Durger, he's running a marathon this weekend. Good luck, Sean. That was the first thing he said to me. He was like, the voice changes, and at first I didn't realize. That's why I kind of make it clear now. I tell you who's speaking right at the beginning, so you don't have to like be confused for a few paragraphs. Okay, this isn't Sunny anymore. But it's still first person. And it's completely different. One thing I personally like about the epilogue is, except for Sunny's sister, there really isn't a strong female character in Deeper Than Hell. That it wasn't something that I did on purpose. It's something I realized after the fact. When I was going through it, I was all, there's really no strong woman in Deeper Than Hell, and I kind of felt like shit about it. And then I was like, oh, but at the end, it is a woman, so I felt kind of better about that. And I think for that reason, it gives the story some balance.
Yeah, I didn't realize it till we got to the epilogue. I'm like, because there really aren't that many like actual like people, or like there's a lot of like sort of characters, but are the question of whether they're people anymore or not is a whole nother topic. But yeah, I was like, oh, and there was like there's a whole like narrative throughout where Sunny is like dealing with his past a little bit.
Exactly.
And that getting like with the epilogue, that comes sort of full circle, and there's acceptance there. I do appreciate it. It's not like you ever read A Clockwork Orange?
I have, yes.
I don't like the last chapter of A Clockwork Orange. To me,
I don't remember. It was years ago. Refresh my memory.
Oh, he reforms.
Okay.
He's fine at the end, but like I like that Kubrick leaves that out in his film. And I'm not big on Kubrick changes a lot of things when he adapts stuff. Like I'm not. I have the controversial opinion of I'm not a fan of his version of The Shining.
That's fair. I mean,
I like it as its own device.
Exactly. That's a perfect way to put it. It's really not The Shining. It's The Shining in name only. It's Kubrick's The Shining.
Yeah, but like I love the novel of The Shining. It's one of my favorite horror books. It may be one of my favorite novels, period. I just reread it last year for I think like the 4th or 5th time. And it's so weird and unfilmable. Like so I get why Kubrick changed things. Because there's like you've probably seen the mini-series of
I have the one directed by Mick Garris.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where some of the horror in that doesn't make sense on film. It's like you got to read it. They're two different mediums. You have to adapt one or the other to like sort of get it to work,
Absolutely.
So can we talk about any sort of like projects you got coming up?
I would love to, because I've got a couple that I'm really excited about. The next book that's going to come out after Deeper Than Hell, sometime this year, in late fall or winter, Encyclopocalypse is going to be releasing a collection of the interviews I did over my years at Dread Central. And it's going to be quite a tome. Over 50 interviews with some of the biggest names in horror. Excuse me. Also a lot of indie names in horror. Excuse me again. So I'm really excited about that. It's going to be impressive, and it's going to be a real testament to my life as a horror journalist. So, I'm not leaving journalism behind. I'm coming out with this book. and that'll be out, in time for the holidays. Get it as a gift for your favorite horror fan. But the other thing that I'm working on that keeps vying to be on the front burner, but Deeper Than Hell has kind of been stealing my energy and attention. I'm writing the authorized biography of Richard Elfman, who is Danny Elfman's big brother, founder of the Mystic Knights of the Oingo Boingo, writer and director of The Forbidden Zone, which is having its own kind of renaissance, in the 21st century. And there's no biographer who's enjoying it as much as I have been, because it's an authorized biography, which means that Richard is my source. And he's invited me into his home. And over the course, we had weekly meetings over many weeks where we would sit on his rooftop and he would cook for me these wonderful meals because he's also a gourmet chef. And we would drink wine and smoke cigars and smoke joints, and he would tell me his life. And, that's going to be an incredible thing. It'll be great for Oingo Boingo fans, not because it's the history of the Mystic Knights of the Oingo Boingo or Oingo Boingo, but because it will fill in some blanks. There's still a lot of mystery around Oingo Boingo, especially their original incarnation as the Mystic Knights of the Oingo Boingo. So it's going to be really illuminating in that respect. But Richard's also doing some amazing things. He's still filmmaking. He's got a film coming out, Bloody Bridget, which I actually have a little cameo in. I get killed, an on-screen death. Love it. So the authorized biography of Richard Elfman. So I'm busy. I have plenty to do.
It's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. And it's so ironic, because I don't think this is a spoiler. I think this is a hook to get people to read it. Danny Elfman and Oingo Boingo do have a cameo in Deeper Than Hell.
They do, and I did love that.
And I wrote that before I became friends with Richard Elfman, so before I'd even met him. So it's just kind of ironic. But yeah, and now Danny Elfman's having a renaissance, after his performances at Coachella, and, there's a big revival and interest on him. So, folks watching this, if you want to learn the true non-human origins of Danny Elfman, you're going to want to pick up Deeper Than Hell, and all will be explained in chapter 4.
And you can also see a human transformer.
Yeah, a human transformer. I love that guy. I want to, if Deeper Than Hell strikes a chord, I'd love to see fan art of some of these characters, Meister Hopnadel and the Junk Man and, the Grim Finger Klansman. I'd love to see how other people imagine these crazy characters he meets along the way.
Yeah, I really love the description of the Junk Man.
Thank you. I love it too. Just what he transforms into.
Yeah. He's a living transformer.
He's a living transformer. So you're going to want to read Deeper Than Hell so you can meet a living transformer.
Yeah, this is just such a. I can't praise this book enough. It is such a fun read.
Thank
fun
you.
And terrifying. And very, very fascinating.
Thank you so much.
So I like to end these interviews with what you're reading, what you're watching right now.
As far as reading goes, I'm just sort of now starting to immerse myself into horror literature now that I'm kind of stepping out of my nonfiction life and into this wonderful world of imagination. I read The Ruins by Scott Smith. I'm such a big fan of cinema and literature. I knew that The Ruins was based on a book, and I'd always heard that the book was even more intense and grim. So it was really fun to read it. Scott Smith, who wrote the book, also wrote the screenplay. So it is a very accurate reimagining, but it is very different. Yes. There are some small differences and some big differences. So I read that. I'm also loving what I'm reading now. I'm reading Parachute by Holly Ray Garcia, and I'm really loving this too. It's got a lot of nostalgia in it. It takes place in the 90s, it's very much takes you back to that world, and it's got some otherworldly implications in there. I just read Maggot Screaming, Max Booth III's latest, which is kind of his take on zombies, and it's a very unique take on zombies. And if you like that, you might like Deeper Than Hell, in the sense that Maggot Screaming doesn't really offer you an answer on a silver platter. There's very much a mystery. Like, what did I just read? What did this actually mean? And you kind of have to be okay with the fact that, in some ways it's up to you, that, you're not being catered to in this sense. So I really enjoyed that. Obviously, I read Sausages by my Encyclopocalypse, I guess, publisher mate. I don't know what you call someone who's on your same publishing imprint. But yeah, the Making of Dog Soldiers. I mean, it is such an incredible movie. Horror fans love werewolves, but when you get down to it, there aren't that many great werewolf movies. A handful. And Dog Soldiers is definitely one of them. And Janine's approach to Dog Soldiers, she comes at it as a fan first and foremost, which is great because she doesn't have a bone to pick. A lot of times, when there are these historical retrospectives on a film or a person, there's almost a revelry in the folly as much as there is in the success. But there's none of that in Sausages. I mean, it's very true to the indie aspects of that film. But it's from the perspective of someone who just wants to elevate and celebrate, and I just loved it.
Yeah, I reviewed it on here a few weeks ago.
Yeah, what did you think?
Oh, I dug it. Dog Soldiers was one of those movies. They put it on the Sci-Fi Channel here in America, and it was the good movie on Sci-Fi Channel.
For sure.
Where they just showed Sharknado all the time and all those terrible.
Hey man, I love me some Sharknado, man. Sometimes that scratches a very particular itch.
I mean, my go-to is Sharktopus if I'm going to get into the.
I'm actually going to be in an upcoming shark movie, Apex Predator Part 2, by Dustin Ferguson. It's another on-screen death, and I actually get eaten by a flying great white shark. So
I'm gonna have to check that out.
Yeah, I'll let you guys know when it's released. It's gonna be pretty fun.
There we go. Yeah. So I mean, I'll just throw in real quick in case people even care what I've been reading. I've been reading Manborg. I'll be review. I'm almost done with it. It'll probably be reviewed in the next couple days. So I have the author on here Tuesday, which that's gonna be a blast.
Hell yeah.
I jumped back in. Have you ever read any of the Aliens books?
I have not.
Oh, they are very hit or miss, but I picked up the novelization to Alien Isolation, the video game.
Okay.
And for being a video game based novel, it feels it's really good.
I think video games are an incredibly fertile source of storytelling, and these days, the production teams put just as much thought into characters and motivations and plots and themes as any film. So I think it's a great idea to do these novelizations of video games because they're creating some of the most encompassing and wonderful worlds. Resident Evil, for example, it's such a unique world that they've created, worldview and Umbrella Corp and everything. I'd love to see more in film and in literature adaptations of the best video games out there these days.
Yeah, it's kind of an even more forgotten niche than the movie novelizations or video game novelizations. They used to be big thing. Mainly, they put Tom Clancy's name on it, and someone else wrote it. But
right.
It was still a thing. Like there was a whole Resident Evil series of books that I don't think people even know exist.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I have them. I've yet to read them, but yeah. I recommend Alien Isolation. I'm only halfway through it, but it's interesting. It's a great look at a broken household
Okay.
as well as like alien horror. It's a nice mix of that because sometimes there's so many alien books at this point and they've rebooted the series so many times that like a lot of them are very meh or just weird.
Yeah.
And a couple of them are unreadable, like bad, but this one's pretty good.
Yeah, I'll check it out.
For sure.
And
And
what have you been watching?
watching Christian Francis recommended Society,
Oh yeah.
and I just watched it and I don't know how I feel about that.
Uh,
Um
there's a little bit of that influence,
yes.
in when Sonny's in the auditorium, and the people, watching kind of change. So, that was definitely a bit of an inspiration right there.
Yeah, that Society is something else. The best Red Letter Media, one of the guys on there said that it's a movie you just have to see,
You
like
do.
without knowing anything about it.
Yeah. Agreed. Agreed.
It's wild. It's a really interesting look on uh,
Yes.
class structures. Um, it's some of the best effects I've ever seen in a movie.
Hmm.
Period. Um,
Brian Yuzna, who directs the society. He's an incredible, talented man. He did Return of the Living Dead Part 3. I loved Return of the Living Dead. Don't even really remember Return of the Living Dead Part 2, but Return of the Living Dead Part 3 is a great fucking movie. I fucking love it, and I can't believe it's not a more popular. It came out. When it came out, Hellraiser was really big, and it incorporates elements of Hellraiser in there, and it actually adds to the zombie mythology. And I think that was such a brilliant connection, a real hit as opposed to a strike. I just can't believe that one isn't in the annals of history, that people aren't praising that one daily.
mhm. I think it's a matter of time. It's like people didn't care about Exorcist 3 until a few years ago,
It's
where
true.
that
It really had its resurgence. Yeah. Kind
yeah,
of when Shout Factory released their version of it, which had some additional scenes with Brad Dourif.
yeah, which had the original ending,
Right.
which is I don't know. I really like the theatrical ending because it's so over the top and just all the symbolism in it is interesting.
For
Uh,
sure. For sure. I mean, there's highlights of each. Each one has its strengths.
yeah. Let's see. I watched Apocalypse Now: The Final Cut.
Okay. How many hours is that one?
Three, three
Wow.
and some change. It's not Redux is about four, as I recall. It's the cut you should watch. Where I don't like the theatrical version at all. It's too choppy in my
Hmm.
opinion. It was clear it's you watch it and it looks like it's edited down, but Redux has a bunch of things that I don't think are necessary. Um, but Final Cut feels it feels right. And I finally get the film because I didn't like Apocalypse Now for as like I was a film student and everyone was like, "Oh, you don't like it?" I'm like, "Yeah, it just one cut's too short and the other one's too long.
Mm.
I needed something." And then on a whim I watched this and it was remastered in 4K, which this is a film that benefits from a remaster. It looks so good. Sounds great. Like they remastered the sound. So it's got that Dolby Atmos thing going on. So it's I recommend it.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Did you see X, Ty West's new movie?
I have not. My girlfriend is not really into the whole that sort of horror. Um so I have not yet. I have to wait for
Well, definitely put it on your to watch list. It's just as good as people have been saying. You know, you've been hearing very little criticism about it, and that's because it really is very good. You know, and I bet your girlfriend who doesn't love horror, she might actually like this. I mean, it definitely goes to a couple extreme places, but thematically, it's almost like, you know, we all deserve love and we all just want to be loved. You know, it's great. And I don't think it's a spoiler, you know, because everyone knows now that what's her name, Mia Goth. She plays two characters. She plays, you know, a character her actual age, and she also plays this old lady. And you know, if you don't, this is why I think it's better to know going in, because if you don't know, you almost can't tell. It's really well done. It's not lame old person makeup where you can tell they just put latex and, you know, makeup to really make the lines stand out. Like, it's very, very convincing. And you know, these two characters are like different ends of the spectrum, and she floats them both incredibly well. It's a great creepy movie. It's great grindhouse aesthetic, 70s aesthetic, you know, influenced by Texas Chainsaw Massacre more than anything. But I think you're almost an hour in before the first kill happens. It's very, very fleshed out.
There we go. Is it as good old age makeup as in the remake of Suspiria?
Yeah, I think so. It's right up there. I know what you're talking about. If you don't know that's Tilda Swinton, you know that there's nothing to clue you in. You know, it's really amazing.
Which I showed her that, and that was a bit. She was really digging it, and then the end happened, and it was like a little too much for her.
I
We're just
love that end.
through. I've been showing her like we watch a lot of animated stuff together. That's more her jam, or like comedy stuff. But I've been showing her some of the stuff that like really, like, I really enjoy watching. Like, I think we just watched Big Lebowski.
Yeah, love
And
that play.
she did not get it. Like, loved half of it, and the other half she was just completely confused.
Yeah, it definitely goes off the rails in a good way, though. I think in a good way.
Yeah, like, there's just a fine balance, just to get back to Deeper Than Hell, because
Oh, thank you. Yeah, let's go back to Deeper in Hell.
there is a fine balance between chaos working and chaos not working. And I think that Deeper Than Hell rides that line, because there's a lot of chaotic things going on, but we have a character that is like centered in it, and he doesn't really, it a lot of it doesn't affect him directly.
He's very kind of like straightforward about it, isn't he? Like,
Yeah.
you know, he's not very emotional about like these traumatic things that he's enduring. It's almost just like he's journaling it. You know, he's stating it, you know, emphatically. But you know, yeah, I like that. You kind of can't really phase him. You know, like, yeah, he's a fun character.
Yeah, his past is the reason why, which I won't spoil that. That was, I kind of figured out a little bit what had happened, but like the full story, which we don't even necessarily get the full story, because that's not the point.
Mm-hmm.
But what you do get, it's like, oh, okay.
Because you know, again, I tried to think about like what persuades someone to take this life, you know, the life of a intravenous drug addict, the life of somebody who chooses not to live in a house but chooses to live on the streets, or in this case the tunnels. You know, I was trying to think like, what do people do that for? And of course, you know, I talk about like the absence of pain, that being a big motivator, and just thinking, you know, what does he have that's so painful that, you know, he chose this, you know, because it's a really bleak existence. And you know, Drew's kind of crazy, you know, with this idea there's life underground. You know, come on, Sonny, let's go on a voyage. Let's do this, you know. And you never find out Drew's deal, you know. And if I do write more Deeper Than Hell, I might write from Drew's point of view, you know, probably have a lot more, you know, beforehand. But what happened to that guy to make him, not only want to retreat from society, going from street level to one level below to kind of like this labyrinth level. He wants to go all the way down. He wants to go down and never come out. Why? We don't know. We kind of figured out Sonny along the way, but we don't really know Drew's motivation.
Also, where Drew's money comes
right
from, which is something in the first chapter.
Yeah.
And, I love all the stories.
About potential stories, yeah. Like maybe he really was in a boy band, and maybe that'll be my next novel.
There you go. Well, do we want to wrap it or?
Yeah. Let me just tell people that Deeper Than Hell comes out on June 14th. You can pre-order the Kindle version now on Amazon. If you just search Deeper Than Hell, it's the first thing that's going to pop up. You should be able to get the paperback. You should be able to pre-order it in time to get it on release date on June 14th. If you want to stay up to date on Deeper Than Hell's release and my other projects, my collection of interviews and the work I'm doing with Richard Elfman, the best way is to follow me on Twitter. Just not on Instagram, really. And I'm about to max out on Facebook. So find me on Twitter. It's at Josh_Millican, and you can see how it's spelled right there underneath me. So at Josh Millican. Follow me, and you'll be able to stay up to date on everything that I'm working on. But Jeremy, let me just also take this moment to thank you for having me on, for giving me a chance to delve so deeply into some of the themes and to some of the aspects, because I am kind of worried that people are going to get to chapter 3 and throw up their hands and think I'm just some depraved deviant. But you kind of giving me the confidence that it works within the story itself. So I'm proud of myself for receiving that assessment from you, and I'm just really grateful for you having me on and sharing me with your followers.
Well, thank you for coming on. I always enjoy these, and this has been a fun chat.
Absolutely. Thanks again for having me.
So anyway, check out Joshua on Twitter and stay tuned for more horror novel reviews. I mean, like I said, Manborg is next up. You'll probably see that in a few days. So anyway, guys, have a good one.
Take care.